Anyway, by way of introduction, I'm Victoria Baxter. I lead our, those lights are incredibly bright. I'm Victoria Baxter. I lead our partnerships for our crisis response products, along with our sustainability and weather products. And thank you for giving us a time to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the crisis response space. And we'll talk, I'm going to give you, unfortunately, a bit of a whirlwind tour of a lot of our products, but I'll be able to answer any questions that you have after the presentation. So it seems like an impossibility to speak when there aren't actually slides to speak to, but I will soldier through as if I'm a human being and can just have a conversation. So one of the things that I like to talk about when we're talking about the crisis response products that we make at Google is like, why do we do this? As you know, our mission is to make the world's information universally useful and accessible. So this work falls squarely into our mission. As we know, during a crisis situation, that's when information is of the most importance and vital for people's safety, livelihoods. People want to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and what should I do? And that's how we think about the work that we're doing in this space. One of the things that we have is we work across the wide spectrum of multi-hazard early warning systems, and what we're trying to do is figure out where we can have an impact and add the most value. So we look at the entire lifespan of a conflict, including pre-conflict situation or pre-hazard situation through to the hazard itself. And I think I can click through. All right, so we look at a variety of different ways that we can take action, and so this is just an example of some of how our products fit into that space. We are participating in support of the Early Warnings for All initiative, which has, for most of you should know this, but it has the very ambitious goal of by 2027 making sure that everybody on the planet has access to early warnings for hazards and for disasters. And 2027 feels like it's coming very, very quickly. So what we did is a bit of a tour of the work that we're doing and some of the products and how they line up to the Early Warnings for All pillars. So you can see we will talk about some of these. The only one that I'm actually not going to talk about, so I'll just do a quick 2 seconds on it, is we do a series of fire AI for fire detection and boundary mapping, so making sure that people understand where fires are. It's similar in some ways to the flood work, so I opted to talk about that a little bit more. So in the disaster risk and knowledge space, we have an open building data set, which is which suggests is an open resource that can be used, and I'll talk about some of the ways that people have used it in the past. But essentially, what it's trying to do is make maps much more accurate as to what the actual structures are on the ground using satellite imagery. Even a lot of the maps have incredible data voids where they're not mapping existing buildings and therefore actually populations effectively. And this is particularly true in highly dense settings and also where there's a lot of informal settings, which are also two communities that are oftentimes the most impacted by natural disasters or the most at risk in disaster situations. So our work is currently focused on Africa and South and Southeast Asia, covering almost 1 billion buildings. And just to get you a sense of sort of what has happened, this data set tripled the number of buildings mapped across the African continent relative to the previous most comprehensive map. So it's an incredible resource to be able to use in a conflict situation to understand the baseline, and then there's some interesting applications of it as well. Like I said before, it's an open data set, so we encourage people to use it for various sources. These are just an example of some of the organizations that we have tracked who have used this data set for looking at disaster risk and resiliency maps, for humanitarian responses, just to understand where people are coming from. Environmental and climate sciences, you can do things like map potential energy use by understanding what populations are in various communities. So there's sort of almost an infinite amount of ways to be able to use this. And later on in the presentation, I'll talk about one way that we're actually particularly using it. Forecasting, which was interesting after I just caught the tail end of the last presentation, and which was very interesting, as this is something where we are working a lot on, and is a place where AI has a lot of contributions to make, and some things that we are seeing in this space. So we're working in flood forecasting. We've been actually active in the space of flood forecasting since 2018, and we started with Bangladesh and India using physical river gauge data that we got and licensed from the governments to understand riverine floods in those two countries. But since then, we have applied AI learning and machine learning and AI to the model that we've created, and we've created a global model for flood forecasting, again, specifically for riverine floods. And we've now scaled to 80 countries. So we're able to forecast riverine floods up to 7 days in advance, giving people plenty of warning to be able to take action. Physical-based models for flood forecasting are often using river gauges, so actual physical gauges that exist in rivers, and that will measure river height, the amount of water that's going in. The problem with this is that many rivers aren't actually gauged at all. The gauges actually can get washed away. There might not be an ability to replace them after a major flooding event. They might be having data that is coming from the river gauges, but not analyzed with enough speed to be able to give people warnings. So what we did is we looked at this from an AI and machine learning perspective and came up with two models. One is a hydrological model, which is looking at how will the river change. So we're looking at data sources from satellites to understand precipitation, forecasted precipitation, including other weather forecasts that are publicly available, and pushing that into the model. And then we also have an inundation model that we've created, which really understands the geography and the sort of shape of rivers, understanding both from satellite imagery, what we're seeing, and also our digital elevation model, Google's own DEM generation, to be able to understand where the water's likely to go. You know, where is it going to flood the banks? Where is it going to breach? And we need to be aware of that. And then we create visualized forecasts that are available to individuals in the river basin areas. There's a lot of conversation about transparency in the earlier sessions today, and something that we very strongly believe in. This is a product that originates in our research team, so we're always publishing papers and trying to be as transparent as possible about how we're doing with this global model, this innovative global modeling. So we looked at 800 random gauges around the world and then applied what our AI-based flood forecasting model did, and we usually perform better than GLOFAST, which is pretty much the gold standard for flood forecasting. And we're always looking to share that information and to be able to talk about what it is that we're doing. As also an information company, we also think a lot about how to create information for people in a way that's intuitive and helpful. It's not just that there's a flood happening, but where, when, what is it going to look like? It might be because I'm an American or I have challenges with geography or things like that, but a meter doesn't mean anything to me. So if you said a river was going to flood by a meter, I wouldn't know what that would necessarily mean. So you see here we have images where it's trying to show relative to an average person's height. It's also very helpful in settings with low literacy so people can be able to understand it. Just a quick note on another product that we have, which I always think is an amazing thing, is we also have an earthquake detection product that is in our Android phones. So essentially it's like creating a mini seismometers of all the Android phones that are plugged in. And so it has the sensor data from the phones itself, and when there's enough of them shaking at a certain frequency near to each other, we can reasonably assume that there's an earthquake and give some warning to people, and give just a little bit of time for people to understand that an earthquake is imminent and that they can take shelter. And again, trying to show the alerting, very simple information to people so that they can take action in the best way. One thing, I don't have a slide on it, but one thing that was mentioned just on the first panel, so worth mentioning, is the notion about anticipatory action. We've actually experimented with that as well, where we have a partnership with Give Directly, which is an organization that gives direct cash payments to people. And we're trying to figure out an option where our flood forecasting would be able to be integrated with their donations, so that when people are in 7 days ahead of a flood and where their markets are still open, where there's still some ability to buy products that might help protect their house or protect their livestock, or just to underwrite the travel that might need to happen to be able to actually go to higher ground. We've had some experiments with that and trying to figure out the right way to do that, and a lot of lessons learned too, because it's not an exact science, but something that we're actively exploring. On the warning disseminations and communications, we have a public alert product. We've worked on this the longest. We've been active in the space for over a decade. Some statistics there about the crisis alerts that we have shared, the partnerships that we've created, and the countries that we've covered. What we do in our public alert product is we surface CAP feeds, which are common alerting protocol. They're usually from governments or authoritative alerting agencies that talk about disasters and hazards. So that could be more natural hazards, but it can also be other things as well. And we ingest the CAP feed data and then surface it on, so it reaches users via Android notifications, surfaces on search maps, and other products when relevant and when deemed helpful. And then in preparedness and response capabilities, we have a product called Sky, and this is our use of the open building data set, which is basically a machine learning model that helps get more accurate and quicker building damage assessments. So imagine after an earthquake, after a flood, we're looking at pre-disaster images and post-disaster images and basically teaching the computer to determine what is actually a building that's been damaged. And the application of this is that it saves more lives, hopefully quicker, by maximizing the humanitarian resources to most affected areas or to even the most affected buildings. So this is a product that we're, so give you a little bit of a visual of what it's for. It's sort of tagging where there might be buildings that are damaged and then actually learning what buildings actually are damaged with greater control so that, again, we can maximize really scarce resources. And we've used this in a variety of different settings. These are two examples of relatively recently, Hurricane Ian, which we were able to look at low-income neighborhoods that were impacted by the hurricane and be able to distribute aid more directly to houses that were impacted most directly. Similarly, in the 2022 Pakistan floods was another use case for this. We did use it in the Turkey-Syria earthquake as well. And that is it. I did go through that very quickly, but I know we're also a little bit short on time, but happy to take questions maybe after the second presentation so we can make sure to get to that and give everybody an opportunity to hear the other presenter. Thank you.
See if I get my. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, so I think I need to change half of my slides after the Google's presentation. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the conference organizers for inviting us here to present. Always good to be back in New York. And also thanks to the CRAF'd team for funding the project that I'm going to illustrate today. This is a project that looks at the relationship between climate change and forced displacement, for which we receive funding in the past call for funding from CRAF'd, and we started implementing this project in August. So the bad news is, of course, we don't have any results yet. The good news, though, is that we are at the stage where we can take really any feedback and comments you may have and incorporate it in our strategy. And so it's very important for us to be here and engage with all the other actors in the CRAF'd ecosystem, because also as of course this morning the discussions highlighted the interoperability and the collaborative approach is really essential in this early warning system arena. So is this the one that I need to use? How do I? It seems like they're a bit. The slides are a bit too large, but yeah. So they're all a bit overblown. But so this is just a graph on the climate data from 2023. I don't know if you guys where you guys spent the summer, or you guys all in New York. Yeah, so the graph shows how much the average surface temperature of the Earth, so land and ocean combined, has deviated from the normal average in each year since 1950. And basically 2023 is on its way to become the hottest year on record since 1850, when the data started being collected on climate. And actually to exceed for the first time by 1.5 degrees the pre-industrial levels, which was as you know, the target that was set up established in the Paris Agreement. So, so basically, actually in September alone, as you can see, the temperature globally was 1.5 degrees over the normal average. And in general, now global temperatures have risen consistently 4 to 6 standard deviations above the average levels from 80 to 99. I live in Denmark, and none of this applies to me. We actually had the wettest summer on record, but I guess that's part of the consequence that climate change really spares no one and seems to not benefit anybody. We had some hopes, but not working. Now, sorry. It's yeah, okay. Yeah, so at the same time as the world is experiencing a climate crisis, it's also experiencing a forced displacement crisis. The latest figures of forced displacement in the world were that 110 million people were forcibly displaced in the world as of June 2023. As a result of persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violations, and events disturbing public order. Africa is home to about 1/3 of all these forcibly displaced people, so about 8 million refugees and asylum seekers, and over 30 million people that are internally displaced by conflict, in addition to almost 4 million that are displaced by natural hazards-induced disasters. Most of these refugees, basically over 90% in Africa, come from 35 fragile and conflict-affected states. They have the lowest Notre Dame Global Adaptation Index, so meaning with the highest vulnerability to climate disruptions. So basically, where does UNHCR come in within this nexus? So traditionally, UNHCR has been a very protection-oriented agency. However, recently, with his data transformation strategy, he has recognized that data is really essential for the protection and the assistance of refugees and to inform decision-making. So the investment in innovation and strategic foresight that this strategy has brought about, it goes really very much in line with the UN 2.0 initiative that has brought about additional investment in capabilities related to data and innovation within the UN. The issue with the forced displacement is that, compared to other variables, he has additional challenges because the data related to forced displacement are very hard to collect because the population are mobile and hard to reach, and also the drivers of displacement are very difficult to disentangle among each others. Also, the UNHCR operates within a very clear legal framework. This is basically coming from the Refugee Convention, and so is mandated by Refugee Convention, and there's no such thing as a so-called climate refugee. So there's no way for somebody to claim asylum based on climate alone. However, UNHCR recently acknowledged that many of the factors that are ground protection, such as conflict or violence, could be brought about by climate. When we look at the relationship between climate and displacement, basically we can distinguish between extreme events such as flooding or basically hurricanes that cause a very quick reaction and basically bring people to move, but in movement that is usually temporary nature. Or we have basically slow onset events such as drought, precipitation change, temperature change, sea level rise, and these can basically work as a threat multiplier. So that they basically aggravate the drivers of migration that are already there, such as poverty and conflict. So in the same way, let's say when you have a heavy rainfall and you can notice that traffic accidents are usually increased. It is not the rain per se that caused the traffic crashes to happen, but it's other drivers, such for instance excessive speed or the fact that the roads are in bad conditions, the condition of the car. So if you in practice, let's say, are driving very fast in a very poor road, with the sun, perhaps you get away with it, but if there is rainfall, it's quite likely that you're not going to be so lucky. So basically the rain will increase the chance that these drivers, the other drivers or crashes will cause a crash. So we can kind of envision this in this chart. So basically here we see how what is basically the transmission of the climate factors to the displacement. That is usually mediated by other variables, such as especially food insecurity and conflict and violence. This is a chart that is taken from a report that has been produced by the UNHCR office in Sahel, and it relates specifically to the situation in Africa, where most of the population depends on agriculture for livelihoods. So when you have slow-onset climate events such as drought and increasing temperature, to precipitations, etc. These in general tend to affect food insecurity through the decreasing in yields in the agriculture. So people will become more food insecure because of the climate events and will need to move perhaps from the rural areas to the cities, or to perhaps other areas to find food. So food insecurity in that case will cause directly migration. However, there is also a proven link between food insecurity and conflict. People that are food insecure might start conflicts because they need to compete for scarce resources. Or perhaps there will be conflicts between pastoralists and farmers, etc. Also within for overpopulation in cities, and so on and so forth. And for sure, our colleagues at ACLED are very aware of this relationship between climate, food insecurity, and conflict. What we will try to bring in this project is the displacement factors, for which, of course, we have data that we could directly collect. There are also some factors that are mediating and moderating the relationship. And this concern, of course, with investment in adaptation. But in a sense, also migration is an adaptation strategy. And sometimes climate actually can prevent people from having the resources to migrate, which actually could make the situation even worse. So the project is going to be a 2-year project funded by CRAF'd. We collaborate with the Institutes of Earth System Science at the UC Irvine, and we focus on the region of Western and Eastern Africa for a couple of reasons. One is, as I said before, the African countries are the most affected by climate change because of geography and because of the economy, so that the inability to invest in adaptation strategies, and also for a more, the same mundane reason, which is the fact that we, UNHCR in general, are responsible for refugee registration in these areas. So we have very good data for individual data for these countries, and we will try to build an early warning system that will forecast short-term displacement risk as a result of climate, food insecurity, and conflict at the subnational level, ideally the grid level. This project started in August, and now we're really in the phase of the data collection and data cleaning, and really I'll dwell a bit more on the data issues that we're facing and challenges in the next few minutes. So we expect this to take quite a few months, and then we will train the model and start validating and then disseminating. We plan to unveil this in July 25. So this is the project team. So we have 5 people working on this. Although it's really basically this is just the whole team working in data science in UNHCR. So it's really one person that will be dedicated full time on this project, but the rest of the team will be able to contribute. So this system, we want it to be have 3 main characteristics. So we want it definitely to be technically feasible within a reasonable amount of resources. So of course we have a resource constraint, so has to be technically feasible within this budget that we have. Has to be reliable and transparent, replicable. So we want full transparency in the model documentation, in the description of data and the methodology, and make as much as possible the source code and data openly available. And It has to be sustainable, so we want to build on existing knowledge in the sense that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. As I said before, there are many early warning systems that are out there. And so we want to build on the knowledge that is being generated by these and use the data that they generate. And of course, we need to maintain it and update it regularly, so the data has to become available at least at the monthly level. So the data is going to be mostly for the main explanatory variables that we will look at are going to be remote sense data. So it's data that is collected on by satellites and mainly for food security, rainfall, temperature, vegetation, land use, and soil moisture, for which, of course, we will look at uncovering sudden changes. And the spatial resolution, it's at the grid level. So this is just showing that we just overlaid the map in the case of Somalia, drought data and conflict data from UCLID from the two different years, 2020, 2021, just to start seeing like a bit of on a visual way this relationship between climate and conflict. So the data sources, as I was saying before, the climate data will be mainly from remote sensors and satellite data. The conflict are the usual suspects again, the UCLID and Uppsala project views. Food insecurity from Hunger Map and IPC, and also natural hazards from the EM.DAT. We also we'll also plan to use the Open Buildings data set, and in addition, the some organic data we would like also to look at. I mean, of course, we have Google here, and Google Trends is a great source of data. The challenge is when you have a system that looks at such a large area, you need to find search terms that are standardized. There are some studies that have shown very high predictive power of Google Trends search data to predict conflict to predict displacement in the Ukraine situation. But we're looking for some search terms that can be used on a wide range of countries. And then we will also complement with some data sources at the national level, typical data from World Bank, IMF, and especially food market prices from FAO. And then, as I was saying before, we want to use data from other early warning initiatives to feed and especially use it for the predictions. And so this will be mainly from the conflict early warning systems, drought ones, and food security that as I said before, were the main variables that we're looking at. And then I'm going to get to the target variable, which is really what we're most interested in, is like what we're trying to predict here. And so for the displacement, we have two main sources of data. So for refugees is the own registration system of UNHCR. So we have a registration system that is called Progress, and basically when refugees arrive in a country, they're individually registered to obtain assistance, and we have very good individual information for these individuals. And we also have the country of origin. Now, the issue here is this data has 5 levels of geolocation. So the country of origin, administrative level 1, 2, and 3, and also camp, village, and home address, which would allow us to disaggregate by the grid level. But the data set is not complete. So it's going to be a lot of work to basically look at the data and try to estimate the origins of the missing records. And then the IDP, the data set will come mainly from data will come mainly from the DTM of IOM. So as I was saying here, the main issue here will be the missing data, and we'll have need some kind of multiple imputation model to approximate the origins of the missing individuals. And then DTM also has now the coverage that is consistent across countries, so also there we will need to do some extra work. Now what we also try to predict are mainly two things. So we would like to find situations that has outflow of forcibly displaced persons over a certain threshold. And we also would like to identify situations where that forced displacement has a sudden increase. And we know that in general, the second one is a more challenging prediction. Also because it has a different data generating process. So we in the work that we've done so far, we've done very well in predicting outflows in relatively stable situations, but as also other early warning systems, the biggest challenge is to find sudden increases. So in practice, to find change points so basically estimate points where the statistical properties of the time series change. So yeah, here one is just a basic explanation of this. And yeah, this is basically the algorithm that we have so far tested that had given us the best results, which is this prune XL linear time algorithm. Again, like as I was saying before, like we're looking mainly at these three variables that cause displacement, and because of the complexity of the nexus, we'll need in practice to use ensembles of models, so divide the models in submodels, each of which is informed by data on one driver, and then combining all the submodels in an ensemble that will give out the final forecast. We also might need to have different submodels for different geographical areas, in case there are different drivers or displacement in different areas. So just to finalize, these are the next steps in the project, which is it's basically complete the collection and collation of all the data, and design the database, set up all the data pipelines and workflow. And one very important thing that we want to do is stakeholder interviews. So we want to engage with all the other actors in this field and all the other early warning models to have an alignment in our scope and receive feedback, and also, again, to make sure that we can be as interoperable as possible. So we will get in touch with you in the next few weeks, and yeah, we're looking forward to a fruitful cooperation. So I think I'm finished here. So thanks so much.
Sorry. Just very quickly to say that this session is going to run until 4. We're going to skip the coffee break, sorry about that, and then we're going to go to the next session. And so you have until 4 for the question and answer, and I think we have 2 speakers here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I have 2 questions, please. And the first is that there was a really thorough study done about climate and displacement almost 10 years ago, and they found that in really quite desperate situations, most people can't leave. You know, they don't have the ability to do so because there's been no path set out for them. There's no place they can go to that would offer them safe passage, etc. So how is that incorporated into your model? And then the second is that Somalia is a particularly good and interesting example because there would have been a lot of interventions both during the droughts that have occurred in the country in 2021 and then of course in 2022 Al-Shabaab was fighting quite a very serious pushback, and so both of those would have been the main influences on whether or not people could leave or whether or not they got some sort of aid to stay in place. So how are you going to take into account aid that comes to people who are suddenly food insecure or chronically food insecure as a way to mitigate their need to leave? And then how do you account for the fact that the violence can take on periodically a pattern that also prevents people from leaving despite all the other risks that they may face?
So I actually mentioned a bit before when I was talking about like the whole overall model that it's actually one of the factors that complicates the most is that climate forces people to leave, but in extreme cases it actually has such a strong drain on resources that it will prevent them to escape. So that in the machine learning models that we look at, I struggle to see how that could that kind of dynamic could be found. I think we should. We have been looking also at basically econometric studies, so that basically trying to find like an exogenous variation, like a shock. So looking more like specific case studies and see the conditions before the shock and after the shock, and trying to isolate as much as possible this exogenous shock. So that's always the problem of causality, right? To try to uncover it. We just need to try to find these events, and actually we would be very interested in engaging with you, because knowing like these specific facts that you mentioned that we might not be aware of, like, because we're looking at the whole continent. So if we can I think have a snapshot in a particular country, a particular region in a country, I think that's the way to go. When you have like such a comprehensive model, I think these kind of pathways are hard to uncover. So I think it will be like kind of a double work, like on the macro scale, but then try to have some snapshots in specific cases where we have some expert knowledge that can tell us, like there was a specific shock, and we can, if we have good data, I think we can maybe see what happened and uncover some effects. Yes.
I don't mean to complicate it, but I've got one more question to ask, which is that, there are some cases where it might take 4 or 5 different failed seasons to create food insecurity, and in another case it takes 1 failed season. And so how are you going to assess the fact that all these places have very different thresholds that tip them into a particular type of disaster?
Well, of course, we will work. We try to have a time series as large as. The good thing is that our registration data goes back, quite far back in time. So, we have the luxury, I think, there to use quite a few lags. It's gonna. I know that this is gonna be hard, and so, we're just starting, so hopefully I can have some results next year.
I had a question for you, Victoria. I was curious about, very practical question. What kind of lead times are you guys seeing in terms of the warning, particularly for the earthquakes and the fire and flood warning? Because I was thinking about those in the context of the amount of time that you actually need to respond and prepare. Obviously differs whether there's a flood coming and you can see it from a ways away versus like experiencing an earthquake. So I was just curious what you guys are getting right now and what's the goal in terms of lead time for warning?
Right now, we've had data where we've been able to forecast floods up to 7 days in advance. That's not in every case, but that's the sort of edge case of what we've been seeing in our flood forecasting. Earthquakes is seconds. That's just what it is. So it's giving people maybe 15 to 30 seconds, which is enough time to be able to get to the nearest safety that you can in that situation, but they just don't come with that much more warning because it's detecting when the shaking is actually already starting.
Right, that makes sense. And what about the fires?
The fires varies. So we can detect. We're working on ignition detection, so catching fires right as they're starting, and so that's the warning is sort of hard to assess because it's sort of catching fires before they build into bigger fires, but each fire has its own trajectory. And then the other thing that we're trying to figure out is boundary mapping so that people understand sort of where the fire is moving to and how close it is to getting to your house, which is also kind of complicated with the way that the data comes across in satellite imagery, but trying to get with some precision to be able to understand the shape and direction of fire.
Thank you.
I'm actually also curious about the flyover rate of the instruments in the fire detection.
We're using satellites that I don't know. I'd have to check that for you. But there's different satellites that we use for different parts of the model. Some of them are stationary so that they're over an area and get more constant imagery, and then others that fly over in sometimes 12 to 24-hour increments. It just depends on exactly where and what aspect of the model we're looking at.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a twofold of question for you. One being, is it by accident or by conscious choice that you present a lot of work on crises, not so much on conflict? Is Google choosing to remain, let's say, apolitical in that space? And second, how is this work embedded in the organization, right? At the end of the day, we need more private partners in this space, but unfortunately they have certain revenue objectives that this work doesn't necessarily meet. So how do you ensure that this is institutionalized, that there can actually be longer-standing collaborations, longer-standing impact?
Sure.
Thanks.
The work that we're doing with the flood forecasting and fires is just where we had the access to the data and our models existed. I think we're all learning here how complicated it would be to create a model that effectively would understand and predict violence. That I've been inspired by all the presentations that I've heard today, so it's interesting to consider it. But it's really where we had the data and the ability to use some of our existing technology and then apply models where it could happen. And then the second question is about how it's institutionalized. So for us, it is, social impact. I'm part of a social impact team on the partnership side that works with a wide range of people across Google on a number of social impact topics. And we actually consider it pretty core to our mission because it is really about user need at the end of the day. And these are high impact user need situations. So we work primarily, where we're located is primarily in search and in organic search. So we're trying to anticipate and address user need as quickly as possible, and that is the core business of search at the end of the day. So there's a really strong commitment to it. It's often talked about at the highest levels of our organization, and we consider it a really incredible use of AI and a positive demonstration of AI for social good, and just has been reinforced and committed by leadership over and over again. But it's a good question and something to think about. Sure.
No, because
Everybody's asking.
you might have. I mean, I missed a part of your presentation because we were trying to figure out the slide issue, but. Yeah, because we made the extensive search of early warning systems, and some of them, I mean, yours kind of overlap with some others that are already there, right? So I was just wondering, like, I think the flooding, or like what, like you see that your data are, better predictor than than the ones that were out there already in this kind of early warning systems for the same target variable. I mean, I don't know how you. What you bring more than those that were already.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that we bring from Google. One is the computing power, so being able to use our computing power to run the AI models. And the second is our existing digital elevation model. We were actually one of the first use cases for the model when it was created with Google. So that was an opportunity to take something that had existed from a research perspective and use it in the practical setting. But it's really important too to be additive to the ecosystem. So we're constantly talking to ecosystem partners to understand what is being used, where are potentially opportunities, and what are needs that we can fill. Everybody does want a coffee break afterwards.